our tenant is in our kitchen making coffee wearing no clothes.
You're listening to the House Hacking Podcast, your number one place for all things house hacking.
Chris, man, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. I'm glad we got connected. You know, for folks that don't know you, I mean, who are you and what are you doing nowadays?
Yeah, I'm Chris Hutchins. I host a podcast called All the Hacks, which is all about upgrading your life, money, and travel. I also, in my day job, I work at Wealthfront, and I'm in charge of helping build new products to help people build their wealth through investing.
And for folks that don't know what Wealthfront is, you know, give them an idea of what Wealthfront is. I know a lot of folks might be familiar with personal capital. You know, how does Wealthfront work? We'll let you plug your company for free. A little free advertising.
Yeah, of course.
For them.
No, Wealthfront. We're an online place that you can invest and save for the future. So we have investment accounts that are automated. They do tax loss harvesting for you. They direct index in the entire S&P 500 for you. Lots of different things like that. We have a high yield savings account that you can use to automate. And the last 18 months of my time, I've been working on automation. So the ability to say, always leave like $10,000 in my checking account and then auto sweep the rest wherever it makes sense, whether it's your 529, your IRA, your long-term savings. And you can say, let's leave this much in my emergency fund. Let's put this much each month in my IRA and invest the rest. So we're trying to build an entire place where you can automate your financial life and help build your wealth through investing.
Awesome. So I'm familiar with Wealthfront and like Betterment, but for folks that aren't, I'm going to put a link for Wealthfront into the show notes. And then obviously we're going to link to your podcast, All the Hacks, as well. I've really been enjoying it. So we obviously don't have you on to talk about Wealthfront. We got you on to talk about house hacking. So let's just start high-level summary with your house hack. Are you still in the house hack, or when was this? Just fill us in on that little bit of a recap of what you did.
Yeah, quick recap was in 2010, my wife and I bought our first home, and this is our first house, and we found a house that actually we could turn a bedroom into a rental apartment. So we basically turned one of the bedrooms into a rental apartment, and we were able to both Airbnb and do long-term tenants for about 10 years up until we moved about 10 months ago.
Oh, awesome. So pretty recently then.
Yeah. At the end of last year, we moved, and now instead of having a room that we turn into a rental, we have a room that we have an au pair in that is kind of like maybe a child. We went from house hacking to childcare hacking.
Oh, gotcha. Cool. And I obviously know a little bit more of your story. So folks that are listening, this isn't really a roommate style house hack. This is going to be a income suite style of house hacking, or at least that's what we refer to it on the show. So let's actually dive in. I mean, 2010, you're getting ready to buy your first home. Where were y'all living at the time, and what was your rent like?
Yeah, so we were living in the Mission District of San Francisco, and we actually were happy renting. We weren't planning on buying a house, but my parents were in town, and in between meals, we were like, what do we do with my parents? Well, what activities do we do? We were like, gosh, I think the day before we'd gone to a museum, and we were like, gosh, what do we do? And we were like, I guess we could go to open houses and we could just look at some houses in the neighborhood. My mom loves that. My dad loves that. So we started going around, and, we went to one house that looked like, a dungeon. It was like the worst, like creepiest house you've ever been at.
Yeah.
And then the next house was like just not a good fit. And then the last house, which if I remember right, the open house closed at 2 and it was like 158. And we lived actually a block away. So it was like, couldn't have been closer. Yeah. And we were like racing there, and we were like, are we too late to take a look? And at the time, we weren't necessarily ready to buy a house. We were just kind of looking around, just trying to, spend time for the day. And we saw this house. And the thing that did it for us was we went, and it was 2 stories, and the downstairs was actually the ground floor. So in San Francisco, a lot of times you have the garage on the ground floor, and you walk up the stairs to get to the main floor. Behind the garage was one of the bedrooms, and it had its own entrance to the outside. And we thought, oh my gosh, if we just lock the door and you can't get in the rest of the house, they have their own entrance, their own bathroom. We could turn this into a rental, and that would actually let us afford a house that we thought we could grow into, because we didn't need, we were two people. We didn't need 3 bedrooms, but we thought, gosh, if you're going to buy a house and, if you're going to buy a house and want to live in it for 5-10 years to really make it a good deal, we thought we need to buy a place that we could be in for a while, and we wanted to have room to grow, but this was like the perfect combination.
All right, so let me get this straight. First floor is a garage and 1 bedroom, and then was there actually a private entrance or like a foyer, and then you go up to the second floor that had the extra 2 bedrooms?
Yeah, so you actually, the front of the house is kind of, if you remember, like the Full House, you walk up like 20 stairs to the front door. So you enter the building on the second floor, and that's the main house, right? You have your living room, your bedroom, your bathroom, your kitchen, everything. And then you go downstairs to what feels like the basement, but technically is the ground floor, and there's 1 bedroom there. So the main entrance to the house is, we basically had a 2-bedroom apartment, and then downstairs there was a kind of a 1-bedroom with its own entrance that we kind of turned into a studio.
Yeah, and then was there a bathroom downstairs?
So funny enough, the downstairs was the master. So it was the largest bedroom, and the bathroom had a shower, a tub, 2 sink kind of in the middle, and it was like massive. And so the one downside was we moved into what was kind of just a regular bedroom, we could turn the master into a rental unit.
Gotcha. And then, so your living space had the kitchen, the living room, 2 bedrooms, and then was there just another bathroom or half bath?
Yeah, so we were lucky. This place was 3 bedrooms. Each bedroom had a bathroom en suite, and then there was a little powder room. So, we still had enough. We had a room and a guest room, and then downstairs was kind of a total studio, but with no kitchen.
Okay, so I got to ask, had you been involved in real estate at all before this, or like what made you like come across this place and just say, we're not even looking for a place and we're just spending time with the parents, and we realized like, oh man, this could be a rental property. Like how did that evolve?
So I remember I've kind of been involved in the Silicon Valley tech kind of scene for a while. I remember meeting a few guys when they were starting a company called Airbed and Breakfast, which we all know as Airbnb now. But back in the day, this was not, this was just 3 guys trying to figure something out. And so I'd always had in the back of my mind this idea that, wow, you could run, you could rent out a room, you could make money, you could, this is a thing, but it was kind of new. And I always thought, oh, that would be fun. But before this house, we were living in a, I think, and keep in mind, San Francisco is wildly overpriced. But back in 2010, I just looked it up before we talked. We were paying $2,800 a month for a 1-bedroom loft. And by 1-bedroom loft, I mean the bedroom is upstairs overlooking the living room. So there's no private door. It's kind of totally open. And so we were like, well, we can't Airbnb anything right now because everything is open to everyone. But one day, maybe we'll be able to have a place where we could rent something out and make some income. And this kind of felt like a new thing. So I think thinking about Airbnb as kind of a new way to make money that wasn't really kind of well known yet, I think was what was exciting. And so when we first bought the place, we thought, oh, this is going to be an Airbnb thing. And only over time did we kind of switch to long-term tenants.
And then was your wife 100% on board with this concept, or were y'all actually married at this point, or were y'all still dating? And then just fill us in a little bit about how that was.
So we met in college in 2004. So we'd kind of been together for 6 years. And I think I know a lot of times I talk to people that aren't comfortable with people kind of in their space. Yeah. We took a trip in 2009 before we bought the house, and we backpacked around the world for 7 months.
Awesome.
And we were on a budget of, I think it was like $30 a day.
So was this all hostels, like shared rooms and everything?
No, it was all couch surfing.
Oh,
so we spent the whole trip staying with people, staying on their couch. And because we didn't think we had the money to do the hostel thing. We thought that was too much.
Yeah.
Before we left, we actually wanted to build up our reputation on the nonprofit couch surfing website. And so we hosted lots of people. So we got pretty comfortable with people living in our space, staying with us. before we left. And so that was kind of natural. I think we were a few years later. We didn't want to have a roommate in our kitchen all the time, but the idea of someone living in our space with a door locked didn't bother us at all.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. So quick question, just because I love traveling, and I know a lot of our listeners do as well. Where'd you guys travel? Was this all over? Did you do Asia, Central South America, Europe?
We took a one-way ticket from San Francisco to Cape Town, South Africa. And we were trying to do it on the cheap. So it was actually like 5 one-way tickets that got us there. Yeah. And then we mostly went overland all the way up Africa, through the Middle East, through India and Southeast Asia, and flew home from Singapore.
Oh, awesome.
It was amazing.
Awesome. All right, so y'all got back from this round-the-world trip. Y'all were used to sharing space. What type of work were y'all doing at the time?
Trying to think when this all happened. I was working at a startup. I think it was my second startup I was working at, just kind of living startup life. And I think my wife at the time was working, I think she was working actually at Zimride, which was a company that eventually became Lyft. But at the time was a online kind of message board, if you will, for finding long distance ride sharing partners. So I want to go to LA for the weekend, or I commute, 45 minutes every day. Does anyone want to commute with me?
Gotcha. All right. So, and where I'm leading with this is, so y'all just spent a bunch of time traveling. You got back, you're in these jobs. What ended up being the purchase price? And I'm wondering here, I mean, obviously 2010 was a good time to buy across the U.S., but I mean, San Francisco Bay Area is always expensive.
Yeah.
What was the purchase price on this, and what type of financing did you guys get for the property?
So San Francisco is a really weird real estate market. So what you need to know that is a bit strange about the Bay Area is a lot of the homes that they're trying to prevent people just creating an unlimited number of small condos. And so we saw this home and we were like, everything's perfect. And they're like, just so you know, it's a TIC. We're like, what is that? And they're like, it's a tenancy in common. So technically, your unit and the unit above you, which is another 3-bedroom unit, there actually is just one title, one deed. So you're gonna buy your apartment, and once you commit to buy it, we're gonna wait until someone else buys that apartment. Then you guys have to meet, because you have to make sure that you're okay being on the same loan, deed, title, etc. together. Because if one of you defaults, that's a problem for all of you. And if that all works out, the good news is, because it's 2 units, you can fast track for condo conversion, and you can do it after 1 year. Or maybe it was 2 years. I can't remember the exact term. So it was a bit of an interesting thing, but the house was $785,000. And we did what I still continue to believe is kind of my favorite real estate hack, which is, if you feel confident in yourself and your research abilities, both that house and our next house we bought, I've just gone to the seller's agent and said, hey, I'm not going to go get my own agent. I'll use you, and let's find some way to credit something back to me so you don't have to credit 2.5% to someone else. Yeah. So we got a discount of 1 or 1.5% off the 785. So 770-ish.
Awesome. Cool. Very cool tip. And then what'd you get for financing? Did you do like an FHA loan? Did you put, 10% down, 20% down? What?
Yeah. So we were, it was very interesting. So there are only 3 banks that would do a TIC loan, because they're kind of like giving you a loan for a home, but there's 4 people on the deed, and they kind of know that the mortgage payments are coming from 2 accounts. And so we had to go to a bank called First Republic, and we ended up setting this up. And it turns out it more or less was just a regular loan, and that we got a loan that we each put money into an account, and that account took the payment out. But because the plan was to condo convert, we just did a 3-year adjustable rate mortgage. Because we knew we would need to, nothing would be better than being able to convert and get 2 separate loans, 2 separate titles, a pretty big bump in appreciation for being condos. But when we looked at our bank accounts, and this was well before we kind of wrote an offer, we were like, well, we can do 3.5% down. And we were fortunate that we had some family that were willing to write us a second mortgage with interest. I think my dad said, the IRS is going to charge me imputed interest no matter what, so you got to pay interest. So we took out a loan from the bank for 75% of the home, and then we took out a loan from, I think, my parents for 22% of the home, and then we had 3% down.
Awesome.
So that might be
very cool.
That might not be the best
financing.
financial advice to take out 2 mortgages and only have 3% down, but it was all we could do.
Yeah. And then, I don't think we touched on it. How many square feet was the part you were buying?
So our home was about 1,600 square feet, about.
I mean, this is a pretty nice upgrade going from like a 1-bedroom loft, then traveling the world and couch surfing to, 1,600 feet is huge after you've been couch surfing for a while, or even a 1-bedroom loft. So
our loft was probably 800 square feet, so it was kind of double, but the downstairs room was about 350 square feet. So our living space was about 1,200. But it felt huge compared to what we had before. We had a place that someone else could sleep in our apartment. Like, that was crazy.
I mean, you had 3.5 baths, which is awesome. Cool. So how did it go working with the other tenant in common? Was that a difficult process, or were they saying like, hey, y'all seem cool, we want to do condo conversion, we understand they're trying to sell? How did that whole process go? And
so it was interesting. It was kind of like this weird version of dating, and one of the biggest hangups was that the default condo conversion, tenant in common agreement, we didn't have a document written up, but this happens a lot in San Francisco, so there's kind of like here's a TIC agreement, and we looked at it and we were like, well, this TIC agreement prevents rentals for less than 30 days, and we were like, well, this is a problem, because part of the way we wanted to make our money was from this Airbnb, and it was kind of against the condo rules. And so that was the one thing we had to change before we moved in. And we kind of explained our circumstances, and we're like, look, we're not trying to run a nightly hotel here, but we are trying to use this room to make some extra money. Can we agree that that's okay? That was the only sticking point. The other couple was amazing. We got along with them. We still know them well because we stayed there for, almost 10 years. And so they were okay with that. And so we did that, and then that let us rent our place out after.
I mean, that whole process reminds me of like co-ops in New York, where not only do you have to qualify for the loan, but then you have to go in front of the co-op and say, look, hey, I'm wealthy enough to afford the building and afford monthly dues, and like I'm a good upstanding person. And it is almost like this dating process of like, even if you and the seller agree on a price, the co-op can end up ruining the whole deal. But awesome. So you got it to work.
It's very similar to that. And the way you mitigate it was you put 3 months of rent in a bank account, each of you. And if that reserve amount drops a certain amount, different ramifications come. But if after 3 months, someone hasn't topped up their reserve account, you get the right to buy their place at a discount. There were kind of all these crazy terms in there. Fortunately, that never was the case. But yeah, it was a very interesting thing that I'd never heard of. And, everyone I got advice from were mostly family and friends. And this is not a common thing in the country. So no one had advice for us. And we were constantly like digging around on forums on the internet and talking to people in San Francisco. But it seemed like unless the laws changed, if you could get the condo conversion, you'd get a good 5-10% appreciation bump. So it seemed kind of worth the risk at the time.
Okay, awesome. So you guys got everything to work out. You closed on the property. Do you remember roughly what the payment was for the first mortgage, the second mortgage, and then taxes and insurance? Yeah.
So the mortgage payment was about $2,500. Property taxes were about, let's call it $8,000 a year. So maybe $700 a month. So maybe that's $3,200 a year. And then the mortgage with my parents was an interest-only mortgage that we paid every 6 months. So it wasn't, and it was probably at, let's call it 3%. So maybe it was $2,500, $5,000 a year. So maybe $400.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do all the math in my head. 400.
Yeah, so we're about $3,600.
Yeah, let's call it $3,600.
Awesome. All right, so you went from $2,800 a month for your tiny loft to doubling your space for $3,600. So how'd you modify this space to get it ready to rent? I mean, did you pretty much, put it on Airbnb, or did you end up doing work to get it ready?
Literally, the only work we did was we took the doorknob and we reversed it, and then we realized you couldn't do that because it would bang it, like it didn't work. So we bought a new doorknob that had a lock on it on the other side. So we could lock the door from our side and say, this door is locked. You can't come in our space. And then I don't even know if we did this at the beginning, but at some point we changed the lock into the unit to not be the same key as our front door. But I'm not even sure we did that at the beginning. I think we thought, people will probably assume it's a separate key, so we might not have even changed it right away. But we did was put the key on it. I think when we started, I think we put some of our old furniture. I think we did, we went on Craigslist and found a bed and a couch, and we kind of lightly furnished it. Did
you do any hot plate, mini refrigerator, or was because it was all going to be short term, you sort of figured, hey, no one's really going to be eating in the place or wanting to cook food. They're going to be going out to get stuff.
I think when we started, it was kind of Airbnb, and we didn't do that. And then over the kind of decade we had it, every time a new person lived there, they would accumulate a few things, and then they would say, do you want to either buy this for really cheap so I don't have to move it somewhere? And we either did that or they left it. And by the time it was done, there was kind of a couch, a bed, a coffee table, a rug, a desk, a fridge, a microwave, and all that kind of stuff. But when we started, I don't even think there was a mini fridge in there.
Awesome. And then do you remember roughly what you were making, in your first full year from Airbnb, or roughly per month what you were making?
So when we did Airbnb, I think it was never, we started it and we were like, gosh, this is just more time than I think we wanted. So that was a short-lived experiment where we kind of said, let's switch and let's do long-term tenants.
Okay.
And so once we switched to that, I remember over the years, the rent went from like $1,800 to $1,900 to $2,000, but kind of on average around $1,900 a month.
Oh, wow. And when you sold a place a year ago, was it still getting $1,800 a month?
Yeah, so I think the last rent we got, at one point it peaked at $2,000. I was like, oh my gosh, it crossed $2,000. This is crazy. And then it came back down to like $1,950. But it was always about, let's say, $1,900 plus or minus $100, which if you figure, when I think about the cost of owning a home, I don't consider any dollars that I put towards the principal of the house as the cost. So for me, if you pull the principal out of the mortgage payment and add on property tax, this was pretty much covering the whole thing.
I know. I mean, you're, $3,600, and if you're bringing in $1,800, you just cut that in half. I mean, as is, that $1,800 was cheaper than what you were paying for that tiny loft, and then you have that forced savings of the principal pay down. So, I mean, to me, that's a huge win. So, now I want to touch on, when did you end up doing the condo conversion? So you tried the Airbnb thing, didn't work out too well. You switched to a long-term tenant. How long did it take to get the condo conversion done?
So I think when we bought the place, it was marketed as, this is the easiest process ever. You just file a document, you send it to the city, and you're good.
Yep.
And then that was not the case, right? We had to hire someone to draw up new plans that we could submit to the city, and we had to hire a lawyer that probably cost $10,000 and all of that. And we did get lucky that it was new enough that we were the first people living in this place after they rebuilt the house. So fortunately, right before we moved in, they had done a bunch of inspections, and we were able to apply those inspections and not have to pay for new inspections.
Yeah.
But all in, I think the condo conversion probably cost $25,000, and we did it.
Was that your half, or was the
no total? So we split it, and it was probably $12,000-$15,000 or something per couple.
Yep.
And then it probably happened right around. Of course, it was like 1 year in, let's do this, and it probably finished 2.5 years in, but it was before the 3-year adjustable rate mortgage ended. So as long as we met that, we were good. And once we condo converted, it was kind of like this weight off your shoulders where it's like, now we just own our unit.
Yep.
We're only like, no one can default on our payment but us. And it just felt great.
I mean, 25 grand's pretty expensive, but when you split it between two couples and it's not like you're writing the 12.5 all at once, it's sort of over a process of doing it. I mean, it's still a decent amount of money to spend, but spending 12 grand over a year and a half, I think if two couples are working, you can end up saving that money fairly easily, especially knowing the payoff is coming up. So you got the condo conversion done. Let's talk about what you refinanced into.
So we refinanced into a 10-year adjustable rate because I think from our perspective, we thought one day we're going to have kids and we're probably not going to live in the Mission in San Francisco.
Yep.
And maybe somewhere in the next 10 years, that'll be the case. And so we were kind of comfortable with the adjustable rate mortgage and we went for 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that makes perfect sense. I know a lot of people are afraid of like a balloon or adjustable, but yeah, I mean, if y'all are younger and you're going to have kids and 10 years is a long time. I mean, most people only stay in a home for, 5-6 years on average. So when you refinanced, what did the home appraise for? And then did you have enough money in there to pay off your dad, or did you end up paying your dad off over time? I mean, fill us in on sort of what happened with the refinance and how that process worked.
So much to my dad's disappointment, he had given us a 10-year interest-only mortgage, and we didn't pay it off until 10 years later. We were in no rush, or maybe I want to say it was actually 9 years for some strange reason. But yeah, we did not pay that mortgage off any earlier than we had to. And so when we refinanced the main amount.
Yep.
And I don't remember how the refinance worked with the condo conversion, but I don't remember it appraising for any much more, if it even had to get appraised again. Now that I'm like looking back, I'm not even sure we had to reappraise it. We might have, but I'm sure we did. Like conceptually, I'm sure we did, but I don't remember it being appraised for much more.
And,
so.
That's also at the time, 2012, we weren't starting to see those giant run-ups that we've been seeing in price over the past 2 or 3 years. So ended up being about the same. Do you remember what the mortgage payment ended up being?
I think the payment after was $2,400, $2,500. So it didn't change much. It was the same principal amount. Interest rates hadn't changed that much. I want to say the only thing I remember is I, to this day, hold a grudge against First Republic Bank because they had a 1% prepayment penalty and they wouldn't waive the penalty even if we refinanced with them. And so we definitely did not refinance with them. And so we went for 10 years somewhere else. And I think it was $2,400.
And they had the prepayment for the full 3 years, or was it like a step down? Like year one was
No. If you paid off the mortgage, you owed them 1%. There was like no wiggle room.
I mean, when you're one of the only lenders that will lend on tenancy in common, there's not much you can do, right?
No. We didn't have a choice, but it still left a poor taste in my mouth.
So refinance, payments all about the same, but you've got that weight off your shoulder of, hey, like we actually own the place now. We're not co-owning it with this other couple. And did you essentially have a tenant in there for the full 10 years? Yeah.
Pretty much. I think I would say we probably had a tenant in there the entire time. We had everything from, we had, a single guy, we had a couple, and we were like, what are you guys doing? We thought it was crazy because I couldn't imagine living with my wife in 350 square feet without a kitchen. We had all kinds of stuff. In between tenants, every now and then we would, I don't know if it was on Airbnb. I think it was on Airbnb. We'd list it every now and then in between tenants if we didn't fill it. We probably over the course of the time had 10 different people in there. Maybe 7. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was great. One time we had an intern who was from, I think, Dubai, and we had some funny stories. We had an intern who worked at a friend of mine's company who didn't eat vegetables, and we got to know this. He'd never done laundry. So the one interesting thing was the laundry was in our unit, and we wanted to try to make this rental as appealing as possible. So we said, look, it has laundry in the unit, but just kind of text us and we'll let you come up into our unit to do your laundry. And this guy comes up and he'd never done laundry his whole life. And I think he said his mom did his laundry in college, and my wife's sitting there helping him, and he puts 3 things in the washer, and he's like, is that too much? And she's like, no, you could put the whole load in. And he's like, really? And she's like, yeah, you could do it all. And he's like, wow. And we're like, oh my gosh, this kid's never done laundry. And next week, he just did he just hired the rinse on demand. Yeah. That was the first and last time he had ever done laundry
anymore. Awesome.
No.
Very fun story. All right. So I guess one of my questions was, how'd you end up managing your tenants? I mean, obviously they were living there. I mean, nowadays there's so many different property management softwares out there, like Buildium. I mean, for bigger places, you got Hemlane, Cozy, Rent Ready, that are geared more towards, smaller landlords. How'd you guys manage the whole process?
At the beginning, I think it was just kind of random, online, find a lease template. But I actually, in 2012, I joined Google, and I went to Google Ventures, and I invested in a company called Cozy. So we were investors in Cozy. And so that was what we used to do tenant screening and rent payments and all that kind of stuff. And it was great. And, not just because I was an investor, but it just worked really well for us.
Yeah.
So we used Cozy to kind of manage all of that. Finding tenants was just kind of random mix of, I think it was hot pads, or there were all kinds of random, kind of more Bay Area local, and then Craigslist and all that kind of stuff until we found the right person. And being a landlord is not fun, right? You have the person that comes and is tells you they have a service animal, and you're like, well, this place isn't for pets, but I can't say no. And I mean, you don't know, but I was like, oh, and I was like, maybe I wasn't sure if I was allowed to ask, but I was like, oh, what kind of service does the animal do? And they were like, well, he nudges me if I don't take a break every few hours. And I was like, oh, okay. Are you sure he doesn't need to just go to the bathroom? It was one of those, it was pretty clear that the way this person described the service animal,
you had doubts.
It seemed like it might not have been. Yeah, it didn't seem like it was a real, I have a friend who has a dog that helps with epilepsy. I was like, that seems very functional. This person reminds you to take a break from work. That didn't seem like a thing. But, we had lots of interesting stories from tenants, but none of them too crazy. So, it was always a lot of work, but, managing it with some platform where you do at least a credit check and you collect information and all the rent payments would be automated was great. I think the one time we didn't do all the automated rent payments, it was a friend of a friend, and we totally got burned because they didn't put a deposit down, and then they bailed, and we were stuck without a tenant for a month, and we were kind of disappointed.
Well, I think that's a good tip. Always do the screening and the leases. And one thing I just want to circle back real quick for folks that are listening, if you actually do have someone that applies with a service animal, you're technically not allowed to ask what the service is. Just nowadays, you don't want to open up yourself to a potential lawsuit. So I think you got by just fine. But, here in 2021, don't walk that fine line.
I'm not even sure I asked, because I remember being very cautious at the time. I was like, I can't ask anything. I don't know what to do. If I could remember 8 years ago what happened, maybe they just volunteered it up. Because I was trying to be very cautious. When we were screening tenants, it was, let's be by the books. Let's make sure we're doing everything properly. So just to be clear, it's not certain that I asked the question, but I definitely don't recommend it.
I know early in my days, I'm sure I broke some fair housing laws unintentionally, or I asked about things that you're not supposed to ask. I mean, even little things like, oh, great, how old are you? Just having a conversation with someone. seems very normal, but now if they get upset, they could say, hey, you asked about their age and they felt you denied them because of age discrimination. So,
yeah.
As landlords, we always want to be extra careful on those things. Man, so, some fun experiences, a little bad experience. You were there for a decade. You decided to sell. Was this because child was now in play, or, on the horizon coming up? What made you end up selling?
So there were two things. There was, why did we move and why did we stop renting? Yep. And they were around the same time, but technically for two different reasons. So
I feel like
my wife was pregnant.
Story coming up on at least one of these.
Yeah, so my wife was pregnant, and we said, okay, we have this baby coming. We don't have a lot of, what do we do for space? Yeah. So we had a tenant. We knew a baby was coming. We were trying to figure out what our plan was. And we'd always said, eventually, maybe before our child is running around on the streets, before they're going to school, let's move. Yeah. So that's in the back of our mind. But we still had a tenant, and we weren't ready to get rid of the tenant. And a friend of mine was, every summer invited all of his friends up to Portland. And so he lives in Portland. So we went up there for the weekend, and we had a brand new tenant, and she had just moved in, and she asked if she could do some laundry, and we said, sure. And she came up a couple hours later. She started it, and we totally realized we had to go to the airport.
Yeah.
So she said, hey, I'm not done with my laundry. We said, you know what? When you're done, if you could finish your laundry and you could just head downstairs and close the door, it'll lock behind you. We'll be good.
Yeah.
So we get on the plane. We fly up to Portland. We don't think much of it. And we had Nest cameras on the house, and she knew we had Nest cameras in our space. We obviously didn't have cameras in her apartment. And they were pretty clear. They had the bright red light in there. And so we'd left. And the next morning, we're walking through the streets of Portland with a couple friends, and all of a sudden we get this notification, and it's like, there's motion in your living room. We're like, oh no, what do we do? There's motion. We pull up the phone, and we're like, our tenant is in our kitchen making coffee, wearing no clothes. And we were like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. This is we had told her, a month ago when we first met her, there's laundry upstairs, but it's our space. Just so you know, we have cameras in the house to watch our dog. So we weren't sure whether she knew there were cameras, what was going on. But we do know that it was very explicit that she should not be in our space, and she should leave as soon as she was done with our laundry. That was clear.
Yeah. But
we're walking around, and we were like, this is hysterical, or I don't know what's happening. So about an hour later, we go back to our hotel room, and we look, and we're like, oh, she was making coffee. She went in the living room. She started dancing around the house, completely naked, running around the house completely naked. And we were like, I was like, should we tell her? And I was like, how inappropriate is this?
Yeah.
Would it be different if she was clothed? Is it that she's naked? Is it that she's in our house? Is it that she didn't ask? Is it we didn't know what to do?
Yeah.
And we didn't really want to text her and be like, we see you on this camera. Even though, one, she wasn't supposed to be there, and two, she knew there were cameras. So we were like, and we just thought about it. And eventually we messaged her and said, we have some motion alerts in the house. We just want to make sure everything's okay if you hear anything. And she was like, oh, I left a towel in the washer and I forgot it. And I had to go get it this morning. And so I got that, but don't worry, everything's good. And we had no more motion the rest of the weekend. And then later when we got home, we actually noticed she spent the entire Saturday in our living room, ate some of the food out of the fridge, made herself a few cocktails. Biggest deal breaker for my wife was she sat on the couch with her shoes on the couch, which was a big no-no. And so when we came home, we were like, hey, we saw what happened, and we wanted to let you know that you don't have to leave, but the laundry room is off limits. Yeah. So you're welcome to move out if you want, but you don't have to. But if you do, you don't have to pay, you can end your lease early. Totally fine. And she goes, you know what? I just got laid off from my job, and I would love to be able to break this lease. And she left. She was like, I will be out at the end of August. And then she left at the end of August. She actually left August 27th, and a month later, she wrote to us and said, "Hey, you remember how I said I was going to leave at the end of August, but I left 3 days early? Do you think you could mail me a check for those 3 days I didn't live there?" And the deal seeker part of me was like, "No, like you gave us zero notice. You left." And then the other side of me was like, "Here's a person that clearly thought that like running around their landlord's house naked and lying about it was okay. They know exactly where you live. Like, would it be better to just send her $200 and not worry about it?"
Yeah.
So after that, we were like, "God, I'm not ready for another tenant yet." And we have this baby coming in 6 months. And then, so we didn't have a tenant. And then in the midst of all of that, COVID happened. And we were like, now we got to work from home. Yeah. So then we turned that room into an office. And once we were working from home and had a baby, we were like, we need a little bit more space.
Yeah.
And so I would say the naked tenant was what turned the entire thing a little bit sour.
Yeah.
But the baby was what prevented us, and COVID, I guess, from like coming back from it.
Awesome. And so how'd you end up doing selling the house? I mean, was this like genius you knew to buy in 2010 and then sell in like 2020, or a lot of good luck mixed in there?
I think it was total luck that we weren't trying to buy. We weren't like, this is a good time to buy in the Bay Area. We just bought and sold. But keep in mind, we needed a place to live, so we bought another place. So we got a great deal, and I'd say the return on the investment in the Bay Area from 2010 to 2020 was fantastic. The purchase of a new place in 2020, I think we paid a premium that will probably take a handful of years before we can see any growth from that. But so we got really lucky there. I feel really fortunate that that we were able to see that kind of appreciation in a short period of time. And I'm hopeful that we see the same thing with our new place, but I think we're far less likely to see it in such a short period of time.
Well, was there any sort of dip in the sales price in San Francisco? Because I mean, you're literally in the heart where, like, if you knew better, would you have gotten a better sales price in 2019 versus in 2020 because of COVID?
So we sold in October of 2020, and I think there was a price in my mind that I was like, this is what I want to get.
Yeah.
And then COVID came, and I was like, we're not going to get that.
Not getting that, yeah.
But when we bought our place, it was 1,629 square feet.
Yeah.
And when we went to go list it, we actually worked with the same agent who was our seller's agent and buyer's agent when we bought it. We were like, this guy knows the property. And he came in and he said, we should remeasure the square feet in the house. I was like, why? He's like, well, because there's like 3 different ways you can measure square feet, and some of them are more generous than others. Yep. And we were like, really? Yeah. And we actually asked, he's fantastic. Jonathan Deason, if you're looking for someone in San Francisco. But we asked if we could do that 3D Matterport touring of the house. And he said, no, you can't. You don't want to do it. I was like, really? Every time, as a buyer, I love being able to click through the house and browse through every room. And he goes, yeah, but Matterport comes up with a calculation for square feet. Once you see theirs, if you know there's another number, you have to disclose that. You don't want to disclose their number because their number is always like they just get it wrong on the low side. Yeah. So we recalculated the square feet with some new method that was appropriate, and it was 1,760 square feet. So we went from 1,629 to 1,760. And not that wouldn't have happened in 2019 before COVID, but the bump in square feet, I think, made up for the loss from COVID. So we actually got exactly what we were hoping to get. I think we got $10,000 over what we thought we could get pre-COVID. But I imagine if we had found the extra square feet and done it pre-COVID, we would have gotten even more. So we didn't get lower than we were expecting, but we definitely took a hit from what we could have gotten if we didn't sell, in a city in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, for folks that are listening, I think it's actually really important to look at the square footage, because I've bought several properties where the square footage was wrong, or I would see it on a listing and then I'd go walk the property and I knew it was low. and I would do my own measurement and realize there's an extra 50, 75, 100 square feet in there. And that would give me, as the real estate investor, an automatic upside.
Yeah.
I mean, even in a low cost area of the country, a property in a decent area is selling for $150, $200 a square foot. And if you're looking at, hey, I just found an extra $100 a square foot, that's nice upside that you can have right on day one. So quick tip for folks that are listening. I mean, this is awesome. Very cool story. How you did this income suite house hack. I love it. So cool. And then especially like you found out about Cozy because Google Ventures and y'all were investors in them, and really, really, really awesome.
It was just the best. And, in preparation for this, I wanted to calculate how much money we actually saved. And here was the funny thing, was that the down payment that I borrowed from my parents was $172,700.
Yep.
And I thought, okay, well, I roughly rented for $1,800, give or take, times 12 months in a year, times 8 years, and it was $172,800. So if I think about the benefit, and let's not go into taxes and hassle, and did someone stay a month over, and did they pay more? But within $100, it was almost the exact same amount. So when I think about the net benefit of this entire thing, it was, we rented out this room in our house that we weren't going to use. And the entire, when we bought the house, we had to borrow 22% of the value to make the down payment. And after 10 years, we'd collected about in rent exactly as much as we'd borrowed, which when we moved out, we paid off that loan with money that we'd gotten, and we would have otherwise had to pay out of pocket. So when I think about what it enabled us to do, it was basically we paid off this loan that we, for the down payment.
Chris, man, so awesome having you on the show. But before we let you go, I like to ask all of our guests a set of final 6 questions.
The famous 6.
All right, let's get into it. All right, so question number 1, what is your favorite personal finance related resource?
I mean, this is a bit of a no-brainer for me, right? Like, I run my own podcast, so I would, hard not to say my own, which would be All the Hacks. But if I had to pick another, my favorite personal finance podcast right now is called Animal Spirits, and I think it's a great podcast about markets, life, investing, and everything else.
So we'll link to both your show and Animal Spirits in the show notes. So folks that are driving or out running and listening to the show, we'll definitely have them there for you. All right. So question number 2, what is your favorite real estate related resource?
So this was tough because I kind of fell into real estate, as a kind of luck thing. I wasn't out there trying to find my house hack. When I first actually found out that house hacking was a thing, I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know there was a whole thing about this. This is just what I did.
Yeah.
And someone said, oh yeah, you're doing house hacking. I was like, I didn't even know that. But a site that I love, and apologies to listeners if it's location specific, but there's a website called Altos Research, altos.re, and you can put in a zip code and they run a report, and it's like price per square foot, how it's been trending, 30-day averages by quartiles, all kinds of data. And so I hope that the data is for the entire country. If it's not, I apologize, but at least in the Bay Area, it was a great place to monitor what's happening to rental price or purchase prices. A lot of different features, being able to break the data down in different ways by zip code, by city, and everything, and trying to understand where we are in the market and whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market.
Awesome. I mean, I think as a real estate investor and house hacker, the more data that you can look at, the better. So we'll look that up for folks and put that in the show notes. All right. So on to question number 3. What has been your favorite travel destination so far?
I'm going to break the rules and give 2. One, normally I would say Syria because, it was the country that we went to. We thought we'd be there a couple days. We stayed there 3 weeks. It was amazing. The people are the nicest people in the world. The food is fantastic.
What year was Syria?
So we went 2009, before the war. For 6 months, I was telling everyone, you've got to go, you've got to go. And then I was like, you don't have to go. You shouldn't go. I know there are a handful of people that have started going back. I wouldn't say I'd recommend it yet. If it if it becomes a stable country and you feel confident, I would highly recommend going. But because you can't go, I feel like, obliged to give another, which is maybe on the other end of the spectrum, which is that, it's much easier to go, post-COVID at least, is Japan, which is one of the few countries where I've gone back 3 or 4 times. And, I try to try new places all the time, but every year my wife and I are sitting there saying, where should we go? And it's like, we could just go back to Japan. Like, as much as I would love to tick off all 193 countries, I find myself regularly being like, well, should we go to Japan again? So it's always on the list.
Awesome. All right. So question number 4, what's next on your travel vacation list?
Just booked a trip in 2 weeks, very short notice, to Greece. Never been to Greece. It seemed like, I know it's going to be a crazy place in the summer, but the stars aligned when it came to booking points and finding the right places and making it all work seamlessly. So I'm very excited to go to Greece.
Very cool. Very cool. So are you all into the maximizing the points and credit card rewards and all of that fun stuff?
Yeah, you're welcome to link to a crazy video in the show notes that I did with this Palestinian influencer, about the crazy number of miles I've collected. So I would say I both am a nut about this. I think right now I'm sitting on about 10 million points in miles. And so, yes, however, I'm also trying not to let that control everything. Sometimes it can be... by far, it's more of a blessing than a curse. But sometimes I'm like, we want to do this thing. And I'm like, well, there's no points there. It's like, well, so do we not take the trip we want? And then we take a free trip to a place we didn't really want to go to. So I've started saying, where do we want to go? What do we want to do? And then if the points work, I use them. And if they don't work, I save them for the next trip.
Very cool. So I'll grab that link from me and put that in the show notes because, man, I love travel rewards. So yeah, right now I'm saving my Hilton points. I'm a little over $1 million in Hilton for the overwater bungalows in Fiji, and then
I'll tell you, the overwater bungalows at the Conrad Hilton in Bora Bora is the best hotel I've ever stayed at.
Awesome.
There might be a great one in Fiji, but the Conrad Bora Bora will go down as the best hotel we've ever been to. And my wife is like, when are we going back? So, yeah. In I think episode 3, we talk a lot about points and miles, if anyone wants to get into it, in my All the Hacks podcast.
All right. We'll link to that as well. But, yeah, I think total between all of them, like the hotel, credit cards, I'm not at 10 million. I'm probably sitting on 3.5 million. If COVID wouldn't have happened last year, I'd probably be way less. But yeah, I'm right there with you. And that's a great episode. So we'll put that in the show notes for folks. So, all right. So question number 5, what is your biggest bucket list item that you have not accomplished yet?
Yeah. So I actually keep a written bucket list. And I have 74 things left on my bucket list right now. And it's constantly evolving.
What did it start at?
Did
you sit down and it was originally like 50 and then it expanded, or did you do like this, hey, 100 things I got to do before I die?
It actually started as a project where I thought, you know what? If I put together a bucket list and I could get, and it didn't work as well as I thought if I could get 20 or 30 friends to all put their bucket lists in the same format I did, then anytime I'm trying to go out and kind of check something off the bucket list, I would know which people on Earth I could go tap and say, let's go do this thing together. So if I wanted to go learn something or do something, I could tap people. I've only been keeping it for a couple years, so it probably only started at 100. But, there were a lot of things that I think I've done in my life that I'd done before I created the list.
Yeah.
And so I won't give there's like some silly ones on there, right? Like the list is, do a standing backflip, which I've wanted to do for 10 years and still haven't. There's like build a secret room in my house, but it's hard for those to be like the biggest thing on the list.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing on the list that I haven't checked off is make the front page of the newspaper, but with the caveat for something good.
Yes.
So,
okay. Yeah, I was about to say, well, if you want to get that one done, you could get it done pretty quick, but for good.
So it has to be for something good.
Okay. I love that. Awesome. All right. So the 6th and final question, what is your favorite life hack?
Okay, so for someone that hosts a podcast called All the Hacks, this is really tough. I think the obvious answer for me would be the points and miles stuff, but there's a lot of information about that. I'm going to try to go a little more topical, which is my most recent hack, which I'm pretty excited about, is 2-3 years ago there were really high yield savings accounts. So if you had money you needed and you didn't want to lock it up in the market and wait and have the volatility, you could put it in an account and earn 2.5%. That's gone, right? Like interest rates are through really, really low right now. But we will not spend this entire show talking about decentralized finance and crypto. But there are a handful of companies out there. Genesis is one Gemini has a product like this. Coinbase is working on one. I use one at BlockFi, and they're kind of high yield accounts that are generating their yield by lending money against over collateralized crypto. So if someone out there has a bunch of Bitcoin and they don't want to sell it, but they want to tap into the value because they don't want to realize the gains, they can borrow against that, putting up in many cases two times the amount of collateral to what they borrow at higher interest rates. Mainly because the traditional financial system isn't tapped into that, so they have to borrow from people, and so you can earn as high as 7.5% on cash, and so that's kind of
pretty awesome.
That's the thing I do right now. I use BlockFi. There's a good link on our site, allthehacks.com/BlockFi, but check it out. It definitely comes with risk, but personally, I think that risk for the return is something that I put some of my savings in. Not all, of course.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Chris, man, this has been awesome having you on the show. For folks that want to look you up, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, so allthehacks.com is my podcast, and we have a newsletter. I'm at Hutchins on Twitter and at Chris Hutchins everywhere else, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'd say find the podcast, subscribe, let me know what you think. Definitely want feedback. And if there are any hacks you want me to look up or kind of find people to come on the show, let me know.
Very cool. And for folks again that are listening, be sure to check out our brand new podcast show notes page. And we're going to put all of those links to his show, his social media handles in there. So Chris, again, man, awesome having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.